My name is Eric Vines. I'm the Executive Director of the World Forestry Center. Climate change for me is one of those issues that is highly complex and has become politicized, but in some ways it doesn't really matter. You know, the planet doesn't care. We are the ones that care about this. We're trying to solve these problems for our own benefit. And so I think for us, trying to come to terms with what impacts are we having and what degree of impact can we actually have on the future and how things change is a really important conversation and a difficult conversation, and one that has implications for how we behave. And so I think what we're trying to do is to elevate the conversation and understand what can we actually do that's going to make our lives better, to make this place a better place to live, and to bring to bear what we know about science and forestry to actually have an inhabitable world in the future. So that's why it's important, and we have to have this conversation now because things are accelerating and we have important decisions to make very soon. The population of the planet is growing. We know we're at about 7 billion people, it's growing to 9 billion people. All of those people are affected by trees and by forests. And forests, we know, affect the climate. So we have to figure out how to both mitigate the impacts we're having on forests and also make the maximum use that we can from forests, because that's what's going to help us wean ourselves from fossil fuels. Everything that we get from fossil fuels today, we can actually get from trees in the future. But that puts more pressure on those trees, and we're going to need to have those trees growing in healthy, productive ways, and that's going to be difficult to manage all of those different competing desires for how we use forests. So climate change affects forests, and it's also how we mitigate climate change through forests. So it's both sides of the equation. One of the things that's really exciting is there's a development that's really not new. The Europeans have been doing this for 20 years, but it's in mass timber. It's in the field of mass timber, which is taking small boards and making very large beams out of them, from which you can construct large buildings. So Michael Green, who's an architect out of Vancouver, British Columbia, has actually designed a building equivalent to the Empire State Building in height, engineered it, figured out it can be built completely of wood, which is remarkable. And we have sort of abandoned wood as a building medium for the last 100 years for anything over about 3 or 4 stories because of fears of fire, because steel and concrete provided such an interesting alternative. But now they've got engineered lumber that can actually compete with steel and would in some ways exceed the capabilities of steel and concrete. So I think this provides a really interesting opportunity for us, because when you take trees and you put them into buildings, you are essentially sequestering the carbon. In order to keep carbon, pulled out of the atmosphere, trees sequester that carbon, but in order to keep it from going back into the atmosphere, you have to keep the trees from burning or decomposing. Putting into something useful like furniture or buildings does exactly that. And so this movement to actually begin building these tall buildings and large structures out of large beams that are made from very small diameter trees is an impressive development that's really going to help us both combat climate change and put our forests to use.